definitely good. We good on? Oh, okay, yeah, we're good on Twitter. Hey everyone, welcome to another Third Apron podcast live. I'm your host, Yossi Goslin, NBA salary cap analyst. With me, joining me as usual, Sam Quinn from CBS Sports, and pretty quiet a second half of the moratorium period. Not a lot really happened between the last time we spoke, July 3rd, when we pretty much summarized everything the Bucks did. We went over Bradley Beal teams, thankfully. We got ahead of that. But basically, it's just been Jonas Valanciunas watch ever since. Cam Whitmore got traded. We could touch on that a little bit. And we finally got our first, I guess, real, new development of the past 4 or 5 days with the Norman Powell, this three-way trade between the Clippers, Heat, and Jazz. Clippers, I had a feeling we kind of touched on the idea that maybe they would trade Norm Powell if they had someone like Bradley Beal lined up. And we kind of thought maybe it'd be the other way around. Maybe they get Bradley Beal first and then they go ahead and make the trade. But they made it first. Still no confirmation as of the time of the stream that Bradley Beal has agreed to a buyout yet or has committed anywhere. What are your first thoughts on this trade?
I really like it for the Clippers. We were talking about them as a Pascal Siakam team. Like we were talking about them, power forward was the clear need. Well, they got one. They got a lower end where they didn't have to give up any picks to do it. I don't think it really made sense for them to keep Norm if they thought Bradley Beal's coming in. That's not settled yet, but it makes a lot of sense, right? You can slide him in as the starting shooting guard. And then, like, I've seen people say they think John Collins is going to start at power forward. I would guess that they want to balance the lineup a little bit. So Harden, Kawhi, and Zubats are the locks. And then what I suspect is that there will be one offensive centric player and one defense centric player. So it would either be Beal and Derek Jones or Chris Dunn and John Collins. I think you probably need to make the promise to Beal to start to get him. So I think that's probably what it'll be. It'll be Beal at shooting guard and Derek Jones at power forward. This is a really good team, like a really deep team. They solve backup center with Brook Lopez, power forward with John Collins. And then I think they probably improved. I have a fly going nuts around me in case that's not clear on camera. And then they get, or hopefully you're going to get Bradley Beal at shooting guard. I don't think they make this trade if they don't feel pretty confident in that. So I think this is a great trade for them, and they're really 10 deep. They've got two guys at every position. They have a lot of different lineup optionality. They can go big, they can go small, they can go offense centric, they can go defense centric. I don't think they're as good as the Nuggets or the Rockets, but I think they're like a plausible Western Conference contender with all of the standard health caveats here. Really like it for them. For Miami, I don't know. Like I guess it's kind of just a band-aid, right? Like they get a good player without giving up too much. So kudos to them. I would not be super enthusiastic about, extending Norm Powell in his, I think this is his age 32 season. I would not want to go into his mid 30s, especially because he was dealing with injuries in the second half last year. He was not nearly as good. I thought the All-Star stuff was always a little bit exaggerated, but then in the second half, he was just not the same guy. I still have all the same long-term concerns about Miami where I don't really know what the plan is. It kind of just seems like they saw a good player, they took him. Okay, great. Now you're over the tax. Are you going to do something else to get back under? We'll see. If I were them, I would not pay the tax for that roster. Maybe you do something with Terry Rozier. Like maybe you make another win now trade, but you try to save a little money in that. Maybe you do something else. But either way, my feeling on Miami is like, okay, I guess it's nice that you got a better player. I'd still like to know what the plan here is. For Utah, it's interesting in that they've opened this possible door to cap space where if they renounce everybody and they buy out Kevin Love, you're at, I think you have it at 22 million in cap space, something like that. That's good. And if you're going to use that productively, I'm very open to it. That would give them more cap space than Brooklyn has left, which really does open some doors if they want to be a trade facilitator, if they want to go be a pest on a restricted free agent. The name that comes to mind for me is Quentin Grimes because they have enough cap space to make Quentin Grimes an offer that would take Philly above the second apron, which I just think would be hilarious given like they let Gershon Yabusele go to avoid the second apron. That would be something I would watch. That said, Kyle Anderson has multiple years left, right? I think he has this year and next. I'm not crazy about taking on that extra year of Kyle Anderson money. You know, like getting off of Collins. Collins is good. It's going to help you tank, and boy, are they going to tank. They have gotten rid of veterans very, very effectively this offseason. And it's kind of funny where we're going to bring this up with another team later on. When a GM does a press conference, they don't have to tell the truth, or they don't have to tell the whole truth, right? They're not under oath. There's nothing like forcing them to be honest. When Austin Ainge got asked that question in his introductory press conference about like, oh, are you guys going to manipulate minutes? Oh, we're not going to do that this year. And it's like, okay, well, now we know why he said that. They're not going to have good players to manipulate minutes for, right? They just got rid of all the guys they'd be benching, except for Walker Kessler and Lauri Markkanen. And they're just going to have all these minutes for the young guys, which I like. I think that's probably a good call for them. So, all in all, it makes sense for everybody, but the Clippers are the winners to me.
So we'll touch on each one. Let's just get over with Utah quickly because just to clarify what's going on with them, because they saved a lot more money in this trade. Yeah, they really went ahead and got rid of the last remnants of that veteran group. So now they can't get fined for not playing veterans, manipulating minutes, whatever that is. All they have left now is Lauri Markkanen. Maybe we could even touch on his situation later, because I don't think they're going to lower their price on him, but maybe there could be a little more urgency there, so they can really go full steam ahead with their, with their plans for the 2026 draft. So Kyle Anderson, though, he does have his contract next year is completely non-guaranteed.
Oh,
So the Jazz right now, they have that huge trade exception they created. They're taking in Love and Kyle Anderson in their mid-level exception. So they have a big $27 million trade exception now for John Collins. So they can use that plus the biannual still. Plus they have another small trade exception if they want to take on more salaries in a trade. If needed, though, they could pivot the cap space, but they would have to get someone. It'd have to be an opportunity where they can get like above that trade exception. Uh, if it's for somebody that's going to make more than trade exception, that's really the only reason they need it right now. Because a $27 million trade exception could get most players. So uh, there are ways they could maximize their cap space even more. They can stretch Clarkson's dead money. They could waive and stretch Kyle Anderson. That would add like another 8 million or so. So right now they're at like 19 million. So there is a pathway that they could get closer to 30, but I don't think that's the plan. It'd have to be some deal that just it gets them somebody who needs, with that big of a salary. So most likely, I think they just continue over the cap. They technically have a little more spending power that way. But I do want to just go about discuss the Clippers a little more, just where they stand and their rotation. I'll start with that because clearly there's another domino that's going to fall. And Bradley Beal just seems too obvious. We were talking about, I think that was the first team I brought up when we were talking about Beal teams, because I saw some report about how they were going to go for him, in which case, why don't you trade Norman Powell, because he's extension eligible. He wants an extension, probably as many years as possible. Clippers are trying to have as much cap space over the next 2 years to make a run for someone. I don't know who, could be Luka, but either way, that's what they're trying to do. That's the ambition. And right now, everything that they have on their books, like Harden has a partial guarantee. They re-signed Batum and Lopez with team options. They could still have all that cap space. So that was the main impetus for them to trade Powell. In which case, if you could replace him with Beal on like a 1 or 2 year deal, which would be less than whatever Norm's currently making, because all they have left is about 5 million of their mid-level. That aligns more with what they're trying to do. But as far as this year, I think this is a very deep team. They have their best big man depth, arguably, since the Lob City Clippers days. I mean, can you correct me if I'm wrong, is this the best big depth they've had in the Kawhi era?
backup center has been a problem forever. And like, even before we acknowledged how good Zubats has become, there were always like, they were a team that was kind of hovering on the periphery with Miles Turner. They used a mid level on Serge Ibaka one year. That didn't go well. Like their bigs have always kind of been during the Kawhi era, big and point guard were always like the iffier areas. Now they have like three legitimately good bigs. And like you can play Kawhi at some four, you can play Derek Jones at some four. That's the other thing I really like about them is just how much lineup optionality they have, where they can mix and match really, really interestingly. And then the other thing I'll add, Chris Paul is still out there. If I were them, I would honestly be interested in signing Beal and Paul if I could. And the reason for that is that you have Bogdan Bogdanovic on this $16 million deal. He was not that good for them last year. If you could kind of just carry that cap figure into the season and have it available to make an upgrade if you need to, or replace somebody who gets hurt, like just have that guy out of the rotation, but as an expiring contract that's easy enough for them to move. I think that gets pretty interesting, right? Like, I guess Chris Paul probably wants to start. He couldn't do that with the Clippers. But if he's interested in just going back to LA, being a backup who plays a fair bit, and like having a chance to be on a really good team, I would consider that. I just think they're in a really, really good spot. I kind of want to throw a grenade on this podcast and ask about maybe they're going to chase Luka thing because you're not the first person who said that. I think the reporting is generally indicated the Lakers are probably going to get an extension out of him. If I were him, based on the offseason they've had, there is no chance in hell I would sign an extension yet, but we'll see. I mean, let's just say the Lakers have gotten pretty cozy with his agent, Bill Duffy. So I think they've probably done that thinking we better be securing an extension from Luka this offseason. Um, I don't know that Luka's the guy, but I do like the idea for the Clippers of maintaining cap flexibility just because, like, you never know. And in LA, if somebody becomes available, that's always somewhere they want to be. You have a chance to be the franchise player post Kawhi, post Harden there. So I think they're in really good shape. I criticized them a lot for how they managed the Paul George situation. I thought letting him go for free was a really bad idea, and it turned out that that was absolutely the right decision. They've managed this really well. They've brought in a lot of really good role players. They've done the like two super expensive player model rather than three really, really well. They've preserved their picks for trades. Like, no notes. This is a really good front office. They've done good work.
So I actually was going to touch on the Paul George thing because it's more so the lead up to letting Paul George become a free agent. I think if they were so far apart in negotiations, they took a risk letting him hit free agency instead of trying to trade him earlier, which that's kind of hard to do after how much they were coasting after trading for James Harden. I understand, but at the same time, I it's mostly the lead up. Like if they could have gotten something for him a little earlier, I think that would have been better. But they got a lot of criticism for the way they handled that for him leaving outright. But here's what they've done in the past year plus now. They traded for John Collins, expanded trade exception, as in you can increase you can get more salary than you're sending out. Chris Dunn, sign and trade. Brooke Lopez, Derek Jones Jr., full mid level, like the big mid level, not the whole thing. Batum, biannual exception. None of these moves would be possible had they just re-signed Paul George to the max, matched to whatever the Sixers offered, and they'd blow past the second apron with these two max contracts and big contracts to everybody else. So as far as how they've gone about trying to remain competitive, trying to remain relevant, it's worked great. I am not at the point yet where I consider them like a true contender, but for them to still be in the mix, they're probably gonna look to be above the play-in tournament range again, like they were last year. Like the way I look at it, you got the OKC, Denver, Houston, true contender in the West here. And then I think you've got Clippers, Minnesota above play-in. Like if things break right for them, they can make a run. And then it's kind of everybody else, I think. So
Remember, they did push Denver to 7 last year. Like Denver pushed OKC to 7. I think they're closer than I don't want to say closer than you're giving them credit for, but like reasonably close, and they got a lot better.
yeah. So they made the right choice once they reached that crossroad where Paul George should let him go. And I think they built a very, really strong team. Like they wouldn't have any of these players. And same thing, if they get Bradley Beal, then that's just another mechanism. Most likely they use the remainder of mid-level. It's like Paul George versus these 5-6 players I just mentioned. I think that's kind of a no-brainer that the Clippers made the right decision. But I do want to touch on something interesting about what the Clippers did. Like if when I first saw the trade, I noticed a second round pick was involved. So I assumed the Heat probably traded a second round pick because all they traded was Kyle Anderson and Kevin Love to make the money work. And then after, you know, reacting and everything, I reread. I'm like, wait, a Clippers 27 second. So you mean to tell me the Heat basically got Norman Powell for absolutely free, and the Clippers had to trade a second to move off the better player and get John Collins? And then it rung to me how the Jazz, they had to attach a second last week with Colin Sexton to get Nurkic. So I think I'm noticing there's kind of a, I don't know if this is a trend, but more so the market reacting to a scarcity of big men versus like an oversaturation of guards, where this is something I've talked about in the past, where if there's a position that's going to get squeezed in free agency, it's probably guard, because most teams are pretty set in guard. But we saw the big man market barely moved at the trade deadline. And now we've seen two trades where the objectively better player was moved with a second for a good big man, a serviceable big man, but not, definitely a downgrade from the guard. So I don't know, just something I noticed. It feels like there's like the market's kind of correcting itself for teams have to give up a little something for a big, even if the big is a downgrade from the player you're giving out.
Yeah, Nurkic, I didn't understand at all because like Nurkic is just bad, right? Like he's not a good NBA player anymore. Nor do I think Utah wanted him to be a good NBA player. Like my thought with the Sexton trade was like, if you're just trading expiring guard for expiring center, why wouldn't you just buy him out if the cost is going to be a second round pick? What do they need Nurkic for? That didn't make any sense to me. I guess with this one, it was a little bit more justifiable, but I also just kind of want to point to Utah here and just kind of ask, you waited a long time to make all these trades, right? They probably could have gotten positive value for Sexton at one of these deadlines, if not 25, then probably 24. Collins, they save a bunch of money in the deal, but they aren't like really benefiting from the assets. So I think another thing I'm just keeping an eye on is, are we going to start to see teams now stop doing the Utah thing? And Brooklyn did this last year too, where they let great be the enemy of good, where you hold on for a player too long and like it impacts your ability to tank. It gets you fined when you rest them. I wonder if more teams are going to be more intentional about like, we're willing to get off of a good player for 80% of the price we want instead of 100%, just because it benefits us more than anything not to have that guy anymore.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the bigger differences between Danny and Austin so far, is that Danny has like he'll hold on to the player and until he gets the value he wants, or no, worst case he hits free agency and that's that. Versus Austin, he's just like, I don't. He clearly came into the situation not really caring too much about these specific players, just wanted to move on from them and get his guys playing minutes, because getting all the young guys to play more, because even when if they're fully healthy, if you've got Clarkson and Sexton and Collins, like these guys need, that's like 20 minutes a night right there. You're taking away a lot of playing time from some other players. And they brought in 2 first round picks. I don't think did they bring in a second round pick? I don't know.
Well,
But
they have a
either
lot
way,
of first round picks from past years too, right? It's not like they were
yeah.
one pick every year. Like last year, it was Collier, Filipowski, and Cody Williams. The year before that, it was Keontae George and Taylor Hendricks. Like they're adding multiple high level rookies every year. They needed minutes.
Exactly. And so, I mean, might as well just quickly, close out on the Jazz. I mean, do you think we're getting closer to a potential Lauri Markkanen trade? And if so, any teams you have in mind right now?
The Pistons have been the team I've kind of looked at for a while, as like, you're not paying the A1 first round pick price for a star, but he checks a lot of boxes for them, where like more than anything, they kind of just need a second guy who can be a high level scorer. So could you get him for 2 or 3 first round picks? Under Danny Ainge, the answer was probably no, but maybe you try with Austin. Lauri had a bad year last year. There were some back injury issues, but like when you watched, he was not the same guy he was when he made the All-Star team. Physically, he wasn't the same. So I do kind of wonder if they might have missed the moment. I think we both thought if they could have traded him to Golden State, even without getting Pajemski, but like you get Kuminga and you get 4 first round picks or whatever it would have been. They really dropped the ball by not doing that. We had a similar conversation with Jaren Jackson where when you have one of these guys on these super low cap hold years right before their renegotiation extension or their just standard extension, whatever, it really behooves you to consider trading them because it's never going to be easier to trade them because of those low cap holds. I think Jaren, just given his injury issues, if Memphis does decide they want to trade him in 2 years, it's going to be harder than it would have been now. And Utah's probably going through that, where any team that has $50 million worth of salary to trade, that's not going to be bad salary, right? That's going to be attached to decent players. And the Jazz are going to say, well, that's just salary to us. We still want all those picks on top of it. Whereas the acquiring team is going to be like, no, these are good players we're giving up. That eats into the draft costs we're willing to pay. So I don't know right now if we're all that aligned on a trade. I think Utah probably wants more than another team would give. I think if Lauri comes out and looks really good for the first month or two, I would not be at all surprised if they did like what Brooklyn did with Dennis Schroeder last year, trade him right on December 15th, the moment you can, like get his value up and then get him out of there. I struggle to see this offseason as the time to do it. Ironically, Miami was in this trade, and I do sort of think there might be a match there where they don't have a 1 star level assets anymore, but they could really use somebody like this. You could play super big with Wiggins at shooting guard, and then Markkanen at 3, Bam at 4, Callaware at 5. That's something I would maybe consider. But given the salary, it's just he's not the kind of guy that every team is going to check in on and offer a bunch of picks for, like he maybe would have been a year or two ago.
I agree. I think you convinced me. I don't think they'll move him yet. Just yet, I think they need his value to go up a little bit more. As far as teams, though, one that stuck out to me is just, and we'll touch on this with the stretch stuff. Like now with teams being a little more willing to stretch bigger contracts. Portland is a team I think we both touched on as a potential Lowry team where Utah's probably still going to ask for all the picks and some nice young players, but if you are resigned to trading all your picks for Lauri Markkanen, maybe you can get off a bad contract like Jeremy Grant in the process. I mean, they can't trade Aiden anymore; he's gone. But if you can do that, like if you're gonna trade most of your picks, but also get off Grant's contract, and then that's it, your team is basically kind of set for the next 2-3 years. That's the one that came to my mind the most. Now that the NBA has changed in the past week, we kind of see where teams are. Some teams that may have been Markkanen teams last week might not be now, but I don't know. That's just one I kind of wanted to touch on.
They did get their
Um,
second round picks back from Boston, so they do have a little bit more to trade. What I will
yeah,
say that too, I do think he would be really beneficial for their young centers just to have the extra spacing around with Klingon and Yang Hansen. Just it'd be very helpful to have a 4 who's like a dead eye shooter, especially because they have so little shooting around those guys now. They're such a defensively oriented team. I do think Portland could make some sense. The one thing I would push back though, the picks they have to trade, and they do have picks to trade, but the best ones they have are those Milwaukee picks. A few weeks ago, I actually would have been more open to trading those picks when I thought Giannis might get traded. Because if they had traded Giannis, I think they would have been bad for a year or two, but that would have been to New Orleans' benefit instead of Portland's. Now that they're holding on to Giannis, I think the Blazers are just looking at this Miles Turner thing and going, just run down the clock. Like, just stay good, stay competitive until 28, and then collapse. And then we can really cash in on those picks. I wouldn't give those picks up for anything at this point. I think this is
yeah.
broke totally perfectly for them. So, like, maybe you offer your own picks. Maybe you offer, they got an Orlando pick for Cedric Howard, I think, on draft night. But I would not touch the Bucks pick at all. And knowing Utah, that's what they would ask for.
I agree that I think one of the bigger winners of what the Bucks have done of the past week is Portland, where if the Bucks were to trade Giannis now, and they got a lottery pick in this year's draft, and they maybe negotiated with the Pelicans to get control of their picks back over the next 2 years, then they're looking at a situation where they could potentially get back into it by 2028, which is when the first Blazer swap kicks in. Now you're kicking that can down at least a year. So now that's, when you're counting this past draft just happened, and then the next year's draft, that's already 2 drafts that the Bucks are not really going to be participating in a major way. And maybe by 2027, if this is just like a 2-year thing, then if you're Portland, now you're a year ahead of the first swap. That puts them in a beautiful position to negotiate something with the Bucks. Not necessarily for Giannis, but just something if the Bucks want those picks back. I mean, I don't know what the Bucks will have to offer at this point. They don't really have many picks to trade.
But what
They're
they'll have
out
to
of
offer is whatever they get for Giannis, right? Like they can just say, "Oh, you're trading Giannis to San Antonio. That's an awful nice Dylan Harper you've got over there. It's a very nice Stephon Castle we might be interested in, right?" Like that, I think is the negotiating power that they'll have. They'll be able to like hold both the Bucks and the acquiring team hostage.
I mean, maybe De'Aaron Fox, if Dylan Harper's too good, maybe Portland could be interested.
Well, Portland wants
It,
to stay young, right? And like, look, maybe your hope if you're Portland is that in the next year or two, Scoot or Shaden Sharp, or hopefully both, like break out and look like potential like franchise guys. If you get that, if one of those guys does that, you have so much other youth on this team, and then you have the Bucks picks on top of it.
yeah.
That's where you have a chance to build something really special. Like that's where you have a chance to kind of do something similar to what Houston did, where you tanked for a few years and you got some rookies in that way, but then you have all these future picks coming on top of it, and that's when you're like really, really well positioned.
Yeah, I'm talking more so if like 2 years by now, Drew has finally really declined and maybe they have extended Scoot, but he's still not quite what they're hoping for. Then, okay, maybe they look to try to get one of the Spurs guards, whether it's Harper or Fox. No, I think it's nice we had this Blazers tangent. Like, just very under the radar off season. Yeah, the Simons for holiday trade is weird. At least they got to keep those seconds in the process. Not that I think it makes the trade any better. I still don't agree with the move, but they did get a future first from the Grizzlies, as you mentioned, a 2028 first, which if the Magic are pretty good, they just extended Paolo. If they are, continuing to hit the expectations 3 years from now, that'll probably be a pick in the like 20s, but even still, that's good value to get to move down 5 spots in the middle of a draft. And they still have those extra picks in 2029. Yeah, I mean, I like what they've done, and I think just by whatever the Bucks have done, they're just huge winners, and no one's talking about it. No one could really see the vision right now.
I love the Lillard trade when it happened. I was saying in the moment, these picks they got from Milwaukee have a chance to be really, really valuable, and I think that's where we're headed. Can I interest you in an Orlando tangent after our Portland tangent?
Let's close out Miami really quickly. And there is a question: do you all see Miami making any more moves? So yes and no. So with Miami, they were a team that also was rumored for Bradley Beal the past few days if he were to get a buyout. And they have their entire mid-level exception, so they probably would have needed to save some money. But instead, they get Norman Powell, who I think I would rather have right now and have his bird rights, especially if you can extend him to something pretty nice. Um, and they it kind of makes more sense of the Duncan Robinson for Fontecchio trade because they sign and trade him to the Pistons, and now they kind of have a hole at like a shooting specialist, and they bring in Simone Fontecchio, who's kind of that, not as good, but just another forward at this logjam that they have with Wiggins, Jovic, Highsmith, Kyle Anderson, Jaquez. So now they rebalance that a little bit. They bring in Powell. I'm guessing he'll probably come off the bench. Maybe they'll let him start in the beginning, but I think you need Davion Mitchell to start alongside Tyler Hero. And now they're like slightly into the tax. I don't think that's such a big deal. Like they can figure out something to get below it later. I feel like their roster, like it's not a contender. They'll probably make the play-in at least, assuming they're fully healthy. But just looking at it, I think they're pretty well balanced. Like there's no urgency in my eyes to do too much more. And the tax thing, they can figure that out in the trade deadline. You know, attach. I think they only have 1 second round pick left, so like attach that to, or hopefully it's just like a fake swap, a second round pick swap, better to get a team to take on somebody. I mean, do you think that he need to do anything else?
I mean, yeah, I would say get out of the tax during the season. I do want to argue you'd rather have Norman Powell than Bradley Beal, even when you're getting Bradley Beal at, the Suns paying most of his salary. I'd rather have Beal with price factored in.
So here's what I'll push back is that if you like, what are we talking about signing Bradley Beal to, like the full mid level?
I'm not even saying that because he's giving up 13.9, we assume, but that's over 2 years. So I'm assuming like all you really have to give him is the 7 million, or even depending on the team, like for the Clippers, it would be 5.3. For some teams, it might even be the minimum if he goes there. Like, I think you're getting him at a pretty good price, regardless of what he's doing. Certainly less.
So So the reason I like the Powell decision a little more is because they have his bird rights. They can really negotiate however they want that contract to be formed. If they wanted to make it higher, make it lower, whatever they want to do. Versus with Beal, you're starting over with his bird clock. He's gonna have non-bird rights. I might be overthinking it, like really thinking far ahead for a scenario that might not happen. But there's a reason that like when guys, for example, get signed for the minimum on a 1 year flyer, that people are like, "Whoa, like what's this guy doing on the minimum? He deserves more." I think about like Schroeder in the past, and
Harry
then they
Trent's a
like,
big one.
yeah, and then they end up doing much better, and then it might be very hard for the team to retain them.
Oh, I was going
So
the other way. But anyway, continue.
yeah, so I would guess that like same thing with the Clippers where they only have 5.3 million of their mid-level, so they're probably going to run into that issue where they'll probably give him a 1+1, and if he plays well enough, he's going to opt out of that, and then they could give him like a $7 million salary next year. You know what? You're kind of at risk of not being able to bring him back.
I
So
don't
I
think
think with
I
sorry,
don't think
so
it's
no,
as
just sorry.
I don't think that's as much of an issue
Yeah.
because he has 2 years of Phoenix money coming. So it doesn't really behoove him because there's going to be some offset. So
Mhm.
I think for the next 2 years at least, he has no real incentive to maximize his earnings. He does after the Suns deal expires, but at that point he's 34 and you probably don't want him that much anyway, or he's just not that valuable. And I kind of feel the same way with Powell, where like I want him for 1 or 2 years. I don't want to like give him an extension. I don't really care about his bird rights. I think he's just on the decline anyway. So these aren't like if these guys were 5 years younger, I might agree with you. The bird rights would be really important. I think given where they are right now, I'm kind of happy just going year to year. They're older guys anyway.
I just think there's a little more certainty by trading for Powell. I think that's the bigger thing for the Heat. Like you just trade for him. You didn't have to give up a second. You just traded a couple of players that weren't going to be in your rotation. And now you have control over what can happen on his next contract. Where Beal, just a lot more uncertainty. If it's only a 1 year deal, you don't know if you're going to be able to keep him. Ultimately, I think I would have gone this path if I'm the Heat. And ultimately, I think this makes a lot of. I kind of like this for the Clippers just as much. I think that if they if they were gonna trade Norman Powell all this time for maybe a different guard who can replace what he does, maybe get a little younger in the process. That's one way they could have gone about it because it seems like they were going to trade Norman Powell no matter what. But for them to turn him into another big who can play both the 4 and 5 to back up Zubats and Kawhi, and then again, like all the tea leaves seem to be pointing at Beal joining them. I think this makes a lot. I feel like this outcome is just a better outcome for both the Clippers and Heat.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this: the Heat gave up nothing to get Powell, right? Like in a vacuum, I think this trade made sense, and I don't think they were like a favorite for Beal anyway. So that was kind of an unnecessary tangent on our part. So they got a good player and they didn't give up much. That's fine. I just don't really see this team. I think the East right now is kind of neatly divided up into tiers where like the top tier, the Cavs, the Knicks, and the Magic, pretty easy. The second tier, you have Atlanta, Detroit, and I guess the Bucks. Am I forgetting anybody there? Then you go down to the injury playoff tier where it's like, or play-in tier where it's Indiana, Boston, and I guess Miami's in that group. So you're
I
in
don't
like the
even think Indiana's in that group anymore.
you don't even think they're in that group anymore. By the way, I was just on CBS Sports HQ. I suggested Indiana's a Ben Simmons team. Does that move you at all? I think that's a really interesting fit.
If you still believe Ben Simmons can contribute, there's still some hope, then yeah, that would be a pretty good fit there. So we just want to go down. So we say like Cleveland, New York, like A1, A1A, 1B. We've got then like the Atlanta, Orlando, Detroit,
Oh, I
Milwaukee
forgot about
tier.
Philly. We forgot about
Yeah.
Philly.
Yeah. I would say it's like Atlanta, Orlando are like the three, and then like the Detroit through five ish. And then I would probably want to say Milwaukee, Philadelphia, 7, 8. Um, and then after that, you got like Miami right behind. And then I feel like Indiana's kind of behind that with Toronto. I don't know. That's just my thought on that. I feel like Indiana they lost two starters and a superstar. And like not only like their starting center, but like a guy with a very specific ability to stretch the floor and protect the rim that they're just not gonna like the drop off between Miles Turner and James Wiseman and Isaiah Jackson if they bring him back. It's like that's a huge drop off for next year. I think they're outright missing the playoffs.
I would not. How dare you with this Jay Huff erasure? Jay Huff is going to be No, I like really do believe it. I'm not even just doing a bit. I think he is going to do really well for them. He's athletic. He can shoot threes. Defensively, it's going to be, he's a drop off from Turner, obviously, but like, I think he's going to be good for them. That said, I don't think the Pacers would mind if they fell out of the top 10 in the East and they could just get a good first round pick. I think
Yes.
Philly too low. I think if Philly's healthy, they could be like really, really good. I don't know if you saw Edgecombe at Summer League, but like Edgecombe's legit. I think they're going to end up with Quentin Grimes back. They are a little small. They're a little guard heavy, but I think you're going to be able to run some lineups where like Paul George is the 4 and maybe Grimes is the 3. And I think, yeah, you're a little small, but you're going to have so much skill on the floor that it's not going to matter. If they stay healthy, it's the eternal question, right? But if they stay healthy, I think they're very good. But you owe me my Orlando tangent. So let me go on my Orlando tangent.
All right.
We got to talk about Paolo and the Rose rule because Cleveland just lived this with Evan Mobley, where you sign the former top pick, promising young guy to the max rookie extension that includes the Rose rule bump, and Evan Mobley wins Defensive Player of the Year. And that's what takes Cleveland from like hovering around the second apron to bolting right past it. Orlando is now potentially going to be in the same boat with Paolo, where obviously if you are going to have the season that you're going to have or that you want to have, there's a good chance that Paolo makes an all NBA team. But if he does, you're now like zooming past the second apron for the 26-27 season. Now they do have some team options, some non-guarantees. You can get back under. I suspect they would probably either whether it's trading Jet Howard or waiving Jonathan Isaac, who's non-guaranteed. Like you have ways to get under it, but like if you're looking at Orlando's multi-year window, now you really have to watch Paolo's All NBA voting next year because if he makes it, that costs you a lot of depth. And I think that's a big structural problem here where teams like Cleveland and Orlando have to sit and watch their guys and say, like, we love you. We really hope you finish second in Defensive Player of the Year. We really hope you finish 16th in All NBA voting. That's a bad system. I want them to do something to address that in the next CBA because it really now it didn't actually hamstring Cleveland because Dan Gilbert, to his credit, has just been like, screw the second apron. We're going to go way above it. I don't know if the Magic are going to operate that way. So this could be pretty significant for Orlando moving forward.
Yeah. I agree. I think there will be. There hasn't been really any discussion on how if there should be any reform on how voting goes. It's just up to mostly the media to decide who gets a certain award, and that often like I remember, I think Brian Windhorst was saying like, yeah, some voters like with Jaylen Brown a couple of years ago, they're like, oh, they're trying to decide if should he get third spot or someone else, and it's like, well, he's got the money on the line, so boom, some people will like have that as the tiebreaker.
So you're not
Um,
a lawyer. Can I ask you a legal question?
okay,
Hypothetically, would it be illegal for a player to bribe voters? Because, like, in theory, that's worth like $50 million to you over the life of a contract. And NBA media, as somebody who's in it, we do okay. We're not rich. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I'd be a little tempted if somebody reached out and
so
was, here's 50K to vote for me for all NBA. That seems like it would be money well spent. I want to make it clear I do not have a vote, so I'm not actually talking about
so
bribery. I'm
let it
just
be
saying I think
known.
it'd be economically viable.
Let it known Sam just disqualified himself from ever being a voter because it's crossed my mind where now we're seeing what's going on with players Malik Beasley, potentially Terry Rozier, Jonte Porter, players in other sports. I see there's like a pitcher who's like being investigated for like two specific pitches he did that like may have been I don't know, but like I have thought about it like, well, with the way gambling is going, like it wouldn't like I don't think this is gonna happen. I don't think like the we know people in the media. We I don't think that they'd do anything like this like ever. But like it has kind of occurred to me, well, like if like what if they all organized and like colluded and like there was some like type of bribery? That would be fraud. It'd be illegal. People would probably go to jail for this.
Well, the other
But
thing about this is like it might not be like an active case of bribery, but I will say like it's naive to assume that the voting is totally based on what happens on the court because you like people who are like this level of reporter who have votes, they're in locker rooms all the time. They know these people as human beings. It'd be naive to say that like their relationships don't affect this thought, right?
yeah,
Like that's just human nature. Like I remember like I think Albert Bell lost an MVP where he led in every major offensive category because everybody just hated him so much in baseball. Like I have kind of wondered about that too. I think this whole system is just it needs to be really overhauled. One day I want to talk about this in more depth with you, but like my thought is like what if you just gave every team you have one guy who can go above. That's up to you decide what's going to be, but we're not going to say who's eligible. You get to decide, you just get one. Something like that because the current system with the voting I think is just broken.
I mean, I feel like with advanced stats, we're getting to a point where I know people who do analytics, they like to combine all the different metrics to do like they're like a different aggregate all in one metric. And I think we're getting to a point where pretty soon those are going to be like pretty well representative of like who actually are the true top 15 best players in the league, give or take with whatever games played requirement is met. Um, I would feel probably more comfortable with like having a supercomputer like that's we all agree is like some formula that works kind of decide on that. I think a lot of people might hate that I say that, but I do feel like yeah, just as far as like the all NBA stuff though. Okay, maybe no, maybe we should still vote on that stuff, but like as far as deciding who gets the bigger max in that, I do think we should change that. Maybe that's where my suggestion might be more applicable. And for the most part, I just think teams got to negotiate a little better. Like, look, let's talk about Orlando. I'm going to pull them up right now. Oh, wait a minute. Why isn't it showing up? Give me one moment.
You do have kind of a bar running down your screen, so maybe that's
Oh, no, I know what I did. There we
there
go.
we go.
So here is what they're projected with right now. You got Franz Wagner making a max contract, which I did not feel too great about it at the time, and he has improved since it. Season got cut short, but I still kind of, I don't know. I'm not. I don't feel too great that he got the full max. They gave it to Paolo, which I think makes a little more sense. But you got two max guys there. Then you got Desmond Bain. He's making basically the 25% max as well. You basically have three 25% max players. Suggs got that nice descending deal. So they're right at the second apron right now. They've got like a $50 million tax penalty projected. So that's if he doesn't make All NBA. But let's talk about how, how voting sometimes can happen where the Magic, they only won like 41, 42 games last year, which was a sharp decline from the previous year. But guess what? Like most of that was due to injuries. After they lost Jalen Suggs, things just they plummeted. And now, if they're going to be fully healthy in a very wide open weak East, the Magic are primed to have a significant improvement where they're going to go from 41 ish, if that's what it was, to like 50 plus wins. And I don't know if most like if everyone's gonna weigh the fact that last year they probably would have been closer to what they were before. So like the improvement's gonna be inflated if that makes sense. So here is if he plays enough games, the Magic are top 4 seed in the East. They have home court advantage. They win over 50 games. That is a recipe for Paolo to be voted All NBA. I think I wouldn't say it's like I wouldn't call it like over 50% that chance that he is gonna win All NBA just because of all the other uncertainty, games played, all that stuff. But I think it's pretty high. I think there's a very strong chance that yeah, he does get All NBA. In which case he's gonna get the 30% max, puts him at $50 million. And when you fill out the roster, you're looking at like over $100 million tax penalty. I think we went over this when we talked about Desmond Bane coming there. But now that the Paolo extension is real and we have a little bit more clarity on the rest of the roster, uh, I think it's fair to wonder how long can this Magic team, this particular group, sustain? Because they're probably gonna. I think they'll probably find a way to get below the second apron. It's not like Cleveland where they're just so above it and they can't exactly just get below it with a couple trades. Like you got Isaac, you could figure out something with him. Hopefully Tristan da Silva might be fully ready to take over that role. Like they'll probably have traded Jed Howard by then. So they'll probably stay below the second apron these next 2 years. So I would say probably through the end of the decade they could keep this team together.
And
Yeah.
that's when they become pick neutral. That's what matters, right? The last first round pick they gave up for Bane was 2030. So you keep this group together through then. And then when you can pivot at that point if you need to. We got a Twitter question I just want to quickly answer from John Haywood. When is the next CBA negotiation? I believe the opt out is after the 28-29 season. Am I right?
I think so. I think that sounds right.
Yeah. It's 7 years, and the seventh year after the sixth is the opt out. So that would be after the 28-29 season is when that would come. But yeah,
Oh,
Cleveland is in fully like all the way in mode where it's 2 years above the second apron and then they're getting under one way or another. And this is why I've brought up a LeBron trade for them as something that kind of makes sense. Because if you do make that trade, you have to get under the second apron and you buy yourself more time that way. But of course, you can't really say buying yourself more time with a guy who's 40. So I would say most likely they're just going to keep this core together for
yeah.
2, and then they're going to blow it up. Not
I
blow it
want to.
up.
Yeah. I do want to answer a quick YouTube question from Venkata Mangamuri. I could see Clippers making a move for Anthony Simons if they don't get Beal. I thought about that. That probably would have made a lot more sense if they traded Norm Powell for him. But now it's going to be tough to keep Simons. He's making a lot of money. He makes like 27 million. So, like, you can say, okay, you trade Bogdan Bogdanovic and then maybe a couple of their young players to make the money work, but they're not going to be able to make that fit under the first apron, which they're now hard capped to, without giving up someone else important like Derek Jones or like Chris Dunn at a minimum. And I don't think that makes as much sense for the Clippers. I think at that point you just want to get Beal for
Can I
less.
offer you an alternative? If you
Sure.
don't get Beal, turn around, go to Charlotte, offer Bogdanovich for Sexton, and like if you have to give up a second round pick or whatever, so be it. The Hornets have already won that transaction because they got a second round pick from Utah. So I think they'd probably be happy if you could turn around and give them more draft capital for somebody I assume will be a backup, certainly long term with Knipple there. And Sexton is only at 19 million. He's not at 27 like Simons. So that's a little bit more doable. Just I'll throw that out there as an alternative. We do assume there will be another guard in there one way or another.
That'd be so funny if Sexton does end up going to the Clippers when the Clippers and Jazz just made a trade where like if they just if the Jazz and Hornets just held out, this could have been just one big trade instead of
Yeah.
just moving Sexton around from time to time, from place to place.
Oh, then the other one is Malik Monk because he's in that same salary range, and it seems like the Kings want to get off of him. If you use Bogdanovich, they could at least save long-term money that way. So like they have options, like you said. Grayson Allen, another one who Phoenix probably wants to get rid of. Like you can get guards pretty easily now. I think the general dogma of the NBA is that guards tend to be vulnerable defensively, centers tend to be vulnerable offensively, and wings tend to be good on both sides. Like that's obviously a player by player thing, but I think teams are most scared of defensively vulnerable guards now, whereas you can work around offensive vulnerabilities for a center because most centers do at least have some utility, right? Where like maybe you're not a shooter or you're not an individual scorer, but you're a great offensive rebounder and you can find a function that way, or you're a great screener, or you're a great passer, or whatever. Whereas if you're vulnerable defensively, you're just small defensively as a guard. There's not really much you can do about that.
Yeah, and that might be playing into these valuations of guards right now, where Norman Powell was kind of went for less than Collins, and I guess Colin Sexton was considered negative value in a way if he was attached with a second. Um, so I do want to talk about. We talked about last time we were on about the Bucks' decision to stretch Lillard. We both pretty much agreed that Miles Turner's not the guy that we would do this for. We were a little more. It would be more justifiable if they were able to get like an All NBA player that they could flip for more multiple draft picks later. But Turner's not going to fetch that down the line. Um, but now it's a lot of reporting, lots of speculation that the Suns are on the cusp of not only buying out Bradley Beal but stretching him as well. I was saying last time, it seems like it wouldn't surprise me if the Suns just looked at what the Bucks did and decided, like now they get inspired to do the same thing with Beal. So you'd have to give back about 14 million to make that happen, which I would guess if I'm Beal, like just that's probably all you give up. Like you get out of the situation, but like I don't think they have like that much leverage to force him to give up more than that. I mean, how do you feel about this potential trend of you got teams like the Suns and Bucks? They've been over leveraged on the pass. They're one of the most over leveraged teams in terms of draft picks and having huge contracts and being deep in the tax and second apron. What happens when you run out of moves to make? Well, we're starting to see them max out the stretch provision, which we've never seen that done before. We've never seen teams max out that 15% credit limit that they get. I mean, what are your thoughts about this potential new trend from teams that have like nothing else to do?
We're kind of in the rob Peter to pay Paul phase of this new CBA, and I think what that tells me is they instituted this stuff too quickly and they should have spread it out over more years. But my immediate question is how is the union going to feel in a few years when a bunch of teams have stretched out money on their books and therefore don't have money to say use the mid-level exception or sign players into cap space or whatever it is? Like the players who are getting stretched, they're all getting their money, but they're clogging up their team's books in such a way that that money isn't available for other players. So I do wonder if this is another issue that needs to get solved in a future CBA because like the Bucks and the Suns, now I we don't know what their actual future looks like. We don't know if they were ever going to be big spenders, but like this is money that is no longer available to other players, which in turn shrinks the pool of available suitors for all players, which in turn lowers salaries for everybody, right? It might be by a minuscule amount. It's really going to be just for a handful of guys, but like that's pretty significant to have out there. And I don't know that this is a good thing for players, for teams to have all of this dead money on their books long term.
Yeah, so I haven't thought about it that way fully because at least with like the way the stretch works, it really does give teams like a pretty considerable amount of flexibility. Like even for guys making as much as Beal and Lillard, like the Bucks cleared 30 million this year and probably next year too by doing this. And the Suns are going to clear like 40 million off their payroll. So on one hand, this might hurt into a future player's earnings a couple of years from now. but then you can say that this is probably for the most part creating more opportunity now. I think the bigger thing that you're pointing at might be more so just the fact that there's players getting max contracts that don't quite deserve the full max contract, and that's more so the result of like the post COVID like boom for players to just get these max deals, max extensions. Guys like Bradley Beal, Zach LaVine. Even before that, Tobias Harris basically getting close to a max contract. Like, there's a lot of players that made a lot of money. So Damian Lillard, just him getting this 2-year extension from the Blazers 3 years ago. He had 3 years left on his deal. Now he's never going to have suited up a single game for this extension. I think it's more so the not so much like the stretch. The stretch is just more so the result of these bad decisions a year before to pay these guys what they're clearly not worth. I think that might be more so what is hurting potential earnings, but that may have been more so like the past few years. Like maybe the Suns, by having Beal and being way over the second apron, that could have cost them from getting or from paying Tyus Jones a little more, just as an example. Stuff like that. So if anything, kind of like the damage has been done to what you're alluding to. And maybe now the stretch is actually opening up more possibilities for other players to make some more money right now.
Well, it depends on the situation, right? The Bucks like they did it to like create tangible short-term spending power, right? They did it to pay Miles Turner. The Suns, it's different. They're not adding anybody by virtue of this. They're just doing it to duck the tax. So it's going to be a team by team situation. You know, it's a phrase you don't really hear in the NBA anymore. It's you have to keep the asset, right? Like you used to hear that with max guys where it's like just re-sign him and figure it out later. We don't really deal with that anymore. Like now, I remember Brandon Ingram last offseason when he was extension eligible, there was all of this talk of like, who's going to trade for him because nobody wants to pay his next contract. And Toronto eventually did, but I think we're going to see more and more of that where there are going to be guys who fancied themselves max players in the old world, especially 30% max players, right? That's a big difference. I think teams are much more willing to give out the 25% max because number one, it's a lower max, obviously, but number two, it goes to younger players. But once you get to the 30% max, we're not paying for potential anymore. And we're not just paying you because, like, oh, you're here and we don't want to risk losing you for nothing. No, like you have to be worth the money you're getting. Case in point, Clippers letting Paul George go. Like, I think the old just like max the guy for the sake of maxing him, that trend is over. And then the last thing on this that I want to touch on, somebody's going to get Damian Lillard for the minimum, right? The Clippers are going to, well, we think the Clippers, but somebody is going to get Bradley Beal who could not have afforded Bradley Beal before this. And then even if you're not talking about the stretch, Jordan Clarkson gets bought out this offseason. The Knicks get him for the minimum, right? We're seeing more and more buyouts in general. This is really going to change free agency where teams, especially the really expensive teams, the apron teams, the contending teams, are going to have access to a class of free agent that they otherwise shouldn't. And that is going to create some really serious ripple effects where, like, just a hypothetical, say Boston wins the 27 championship with Damian Lillard as their starting point guard. I would be furious if I was a team out there that like might have liked to sign Damian Lillard and had the cap space to do it, but couldn't because he was getting all this stretched money from Milwaukee. So he had no incentive to take my offer. He just went to Boston because he wanted to win. Like, in a way, we've made it easier than ever for teams that would hypothetically be signing ring chasers to have access to that level of free agent where, like, ring chasing had kind of declined in the few years before the CBA, right? We were seeing less and less of the like really good player in his 30s just taking the minimum to go to a good team. And I think that's healthier for the ecosystem as a whole. You want players making what they're worth. You don't want to give the best teams just this easy access to unfair talent. And I'm worried that, like, if it's whether it's Lillard or Beal or somebody else, we're going to see like a team get its hands on a really valuable player for the minimum. And I don't know that that's a good healthy thing for the state of the league as a whole.
No, that's true. I don't think anyone's really thought about, well, where Lillard's gonna go and what would that do for that team, because we're still in the beginning of free agency. Everyone's reacting to everything else, and no one's expecting Lillard to make any decision. But I think wherever he goes, there's gonna be that type of reaction. If he goes to the Celtics, everyone's gonna like, yeah, he is coming off a torn Achilles, but still, like, assuming he and Tatum come back strong with Jaylen Brown, Derek White, they get a big man. That's a contender. If he goes to Denver, a team that, like, we really love that fit. If he were to play with Jokic, people are gonna freak out that he gets to play with Jokic. If he goes to the Warriors to play with Curry, now they have two guys that could just shoot from many range. So no, that's a good point. I don't know what the solution to that is. I think they already implemented that thing where the rule where only teams below the aprons can sign a guy above the mid-level, but that's only for mid-season. It doesn't
Yeah.
apply for the off-season. So
And the players would never let that change, right? The union would never give into that because if somebody like Lillard is going to get stretched, they don't want him restricted in where he can go.
yeah, but I think ultimately it's I can't say I would be personally, just me, like, I'm not good. Like, we're gonna see. Like, Beal is getting bought out now. He's gonna join the Clippers. No one's looking at this like Beal of 2-3 years ago. That if he were to join the Clippers, you know, the Beal of 2-3 years ago, people would probably be freaking out. He's getting bought out because he's not quite that guy anymore, and the Suns just
Okay.
can't afford to have him on that salary. With Lillard, there's that injury. I can't say it would make me afraid if I'm a rival team just yet. I don't know. It's hard to say just exactly what kind of player he's going to be when he comes back. Isn't he already 35?
Yeah, he's older. And I'm like, again, I just want to stress this. Last year, Bradley Beal was like, would you say Bradley Beal as a player last year was worth a similar amount to like Colin Sexton and Malik Monk, those guys we mentioned, who are making in
Yeah.
like the high teens? That's like
Yeah.
about right. So what we're basically saying is that Bradley Beal is a $20 million player who was making $50 million last year. Of course, that's an overpay. Like, no arguments to that. But a $20 million player is still valuable. And if you're getting a $20 million player for the minimum because somebody else was dumb enough to overpay you in the past, I almost feel like this is going to create even more of an environment of a haves and have nots, where somebody's mistake 3 years in the past is going to start paving the way to like real tangible playoff results in the future. Where, like, look, we don't know what Dame is going to be post Achilles, right? I feel I don't want to say I feel comfortable with this, but I think there's a good chance that even if Damian Lillard is not a max level player when he comes back, he's like a starting level player, right? A low end starter, and you're getting a low end starter for the minimum. That's kind of a cheat code to the most expensive teams in the NBA right now. That's all I'm saying.
I hear that, but let's use that dollar amount analogy you were just using, where we talked about Beal being like a guy in the high teens. I mean, if you had to make a safe prediction on what kind of like production in terms of dollar percentage of the cap Lillard's going to give you when he comes back, like, where do you think might be the highest end?
Well, the highest end, just because like we're getting better at this, right? We're getting better at dealing with Achilles injuries. The outcomes for guys who have gotten this injury lately have been more positive, with Durant obviously being the all-time example of that. I don't think Lillard is going to come back at 100%. That's not even a function of the injury. That's just a function of him being a year older. So, like, the high end is that Lillard is 80% of the guy that he was before. And if that's the case, that's like a 30, $40 million player. More likely, I think he's probably like a 20, $25 million player. But having that guy at the minimum, especially in a situation, whether it's Boston or Denver or Golden State, where he doesn't have to start and play 30, 35 minutes a night, that's super valuable. And something else that I think we've really learned, really last postseason, but over the last few, is that there is a lot of value in guys who can be really, really effective for short stretches of minutes, like TJ McConnell, for example. TJ McConnell was like, he made $10 million last year, something like that. But in the minutes he was on the floor, he was like a 25, $30 million player in the playoffs. He just can't play that many of them by virtue of his playing style. But that's still a really valuable guy to have, who's going to give you $30 million level production for 18 minutes a game. if that's what Lillard is, and he can handpick his next team and go somewhere that only needs him to play 18 minutes, now you're talking about a really, really valuable addition that costed you no team building resources, right? And that's kind of going to get handed out, doled out randomly because we're only going to get one or two of those guys per year at most. So it almost feels like we're giving this like little cheat code, this little advantage to one super expensive team per year, and none of the other ones are going to get it. So like that's all that I'm kind of worried about is like,
Yeah.
are we going to see a championship swing on something like this in the future? And I think there's a reasonable chance, especially with Lillard, that we do.
The thing is, I'm trying to think back at situations like this where a certain player of a certain caliber got bought out and was just free to sign anywhere. And has that ever really like resulted in the overwhelming result that a lot of people can anticipate it? This isn't a perfect example by any means, but I'm just thinking about Kemba Walker when he got bought out by the Thunder, joined the Knicks for 10 million a year. I wasn't fully aware of how much the decline was and just how bad of a negative he was on defense like at the time, but that was at the time still, he was joining the Knicks for pretty cheap. I think people felt that the Knicks who were coming off a really strong season. They made the playoffs, that might be something that gets them to potentially advance to the second round, along with some of the other signings they did. Didn't work out. Uh, Lillard's far better than Kemba Walker ever was. So again, like I know the comparison is not accurate, but I just think I'm just trying to think and I think I'm going to look into this about all the other examples of players like this that become available for free, and it just doesn't really ever lead to that overwhelming result people feel. I think because I think Beal, yeah, I mean Lillard, yeah, at the highest end he is like a 25% max player, which is a 30-40 million dollar guy. I think it might be safer to assume he's going to be somewhere like maybe above Beal, but like closer to him. In which case, he might just it might just be mostly like a high end role player, which there's nothing wrong with that. But I think you just want to be safe about things. Um, but I think like as far as like what that cheat code is, like imagine if LeBron, who right now we don't know what's going on with him. There's rumors that he might ask for a buyout, which I don't think if you're the Lakers that makes any sense. Like that doesn't help you at all. Like that's a cheat code. If a player just coming off an All NBA season, second team All NBA, just suddenly got bought out or like forced to buy out, and then just got to join any team he wanted for the minimum. That's the type of thing where I think people are gonna go have a very strong discussion about this in the CBA somehow.
Well, I think we are going to have the LeBron situation. It's going to be in a year and it's not going to be through a buyout, right? Like what I assume is going to happen is LeBron is going to play for the Lakers this year. Next year, he's going to sign the minimum in Cleveland, and that's going to be the end of his career. But that's not obviously a buyout. The situation that felt the most analogous to me, and it wasn't a buyout, was DeMarcus Cousins going to the Warriors, where there was all of this outcry. But that was also the league kind of doing it to himself because nobody else offered him more money, right? That was why he went to the Warriors because he had no good contract offers out there. And, they just gave him the tax mid level and he was like, sure, I'll come, I'll rebuild my value and I'll hit free agency again in a year. That's obviously not the way it played out, but there was kind of that outcry after that happened. But that's again, he wasn't bought out, so it's not similar. He at least had a financial motivator there, whereas Lillard and Beal kind of don't because they're getting all of their money from the Suns and Bucks anyway. So I think this is just something to monitor. I don't know if it's healthy for the ecosystem when good players under contract are just consistently becoming available either because A, their team needs to save money for something else, so somebody else gets to scoop that guy up for free, or B, like what happened with Jordan Clarkson or DeAndre Ayton, where it's just like, we'd rather not have you, so you're going to go sign somewhere for a bargain so that we can open up a tiny little bit of extra flexibility, mostly just because we don't want to have you on the team anymore. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if buyout reform in some fashion comes in the next CBA.
But either way, I'm gonna be very curious to see how this Lillard stretch and this potential Beal stretch ages over time. Because it's not like you said off the top, this isn't gonna help these teams in really any meaningful way. Like, yeah, the Bucks got Turner for now, but both these teams are gonna be capped out. It mostly gets the Suns out of the aprons, out of the tax, saves them a lot of money, but it's not really gonna help them too much. Like for the Suns, okay, they'll have more room to extend Mark Williams now, but and then
Oh
maybe they'll
God, I
get to
just
use.
realized what they're gonna do. Stop, Treffers. Here's what's gonna happen. Their 33 pick is not gonna be frozen now because they're gonna be below the tax. They're gonna trade their 33 pick, aren't they?
Yeah, that's the other element of that. I don't think, from what I understand, because the 2032 is frozen, that doesn't. It's not like that's not like a Stepien thing.
Yeah, they're free to trade it.
So they'd be, even though that's frozen, they'll
They'd have to
trade
wait a
that
year.
thing.
It's not eligible to be clear. You can't trade anything later than 32 this season, but next year they could trade 33 and watch them trade like the 2033 first with one of those like Grayson Allen or Royce O'Neal or maybe both. They can aggregate again, so maybe. I'm just watching that. I would say like
Yeah,
Toss
trade
swooped in
them.
and sold the 2031 pick. I would not be surprised if somebody swooped in and sold 33 pick.
Grayson and that 2033 to the Nets for 3 crappy firsts.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah,
Look at the
that's the
Jazz
move.
again. The Jazz have plenty of crappy first to trade.
I mean, they gave that, no, not anymore. They gave away all the crappy firsts. The
Oh,
Suns
did
now
they really?
they gave them to the Suns.
Oh, the Nets would be a good team for that. The Thunder would be a terrifying team for that. Although you'd
Yeah,
hope by 2033 the Thunder dynasty is coming to an end. The Spurs still have some crappy picks, I think. Who has the
yeah.
crappy picks? I've long since forgotten.
I mean, depending how you feel about the Magic, the Grizzlies might have some crappy picks.
Oh, the Grizzlies are another team. Yeah, that would be a good move for the Grizzlies. But I guess they already traded one of the Magic picks. But I guess
Yeah, they still have next
that's doable.
year's 2030. Yeah. All right. Well, I think this is a good time to wrap it up. I think we covered everything we wanted to do. Everyone, make sure you are reading Sam on CBS Sports and follow him on Twitter at SamQuinnCBS. And everyone, thanks for supporting us this past week. It's been a lot of fun covering the free agency period. We'll be back if news permits. Follow me at Twitter, Blue Sky. My name, Yossi Goslin, and subscribe to Third Apron where we get